Well, you're going to hear it. The stars weren't so big, they were really quite small. You would think such a thing would matter at all. But because they had stars, all the star-bellied Sneetches would brag. We're the best kind of Sneetches on the beaches. With their snoots in the air, they would sniff and they'd snort. We'll have nothing to do with the plain-bellied sort. And whenever they met someone they were out walking, they'd hike right on past them without even talking. When the star-bellied children went up to play ball, could the plain-bellied bellies join in their games? Not at all. You could only play ball if your bellies had stars, and the plain-bellied children had none upon ours. When the star-bellied Sneetches had Frankfurter roasts or picnics or parties or marshmallow toasts, they never invited the plain-bellied Sneetches, left them out cold in the dark of the beaches, kept them away, never let them come near, and that's how they treated them year after year. Then one day, it seems, while the plain-bellied Sneetches were moping, just moping alone on the beaches, sitting there wishing their bellies had stars, up zipped a stranger in the strangest of cars. My friends, he announced in a voice clear and keen, my name is Sylvester McMonkey McBean. I've heard of your troubles, I've heard you're unhappy, but I can fix that. I'm the fix-it-up chappie. I've come here to help you, I have what you need. My prices are low and I work with great speed, and my work is 100% guaranteed. And quickly Sylvester McMonkey McBean put together a very peculiar machine. Then he said, you want stars like a star-bellied Sneetch, my friends? You can have them for $3 each. Just hand me your money and climb on aboard. They clamored inside and the big machine roared. It walked, it clonked, it jerked, it burst. It blocked them around, but the thing really worked. And the plain-bellied Sneetches popped out. They had stars. They actually did. They had stars upon stars. Then they yelled at the ones who had stars from the start. We're exactly like you. You can't tell us apart. We're all the same now, you snooty old smarties. Now we can come to your Frankfurter parties. Good grief, groaned the one who had stars from the first. We're still the best Sneetches, and they are the worst. But how in the world will we know, they all frowned, if which kind is what or the other way round? Then up stepped McBean with a very sly wink, and he said, things are not quite as bad as you think. You don't know who's who, that's perfectly true. But come with me, friends. You know what I'll do? I'll make you again the best Sneetches on beaches, and all it will cost you is $10 each. Belly stars are no longer in style, said McBean. What you need is a trip through the stars off machine. This wondrous contraption will take off your stars, so you won't look like Sneetches who have them on dogs. That handy machine, working very precisely, removed all the stars from their bellies quite nicely. Then with snoots in the air, they paraded about, they opened their beaks, proceeded to shout, we now know who's who, and there isn't a doubt. The best kind of Sneetches are Sneetches without. And of course, those with stars all got frightfully mad. To be wearing a star now was frightfully bad. And of course, old Sylvester McMonkey McBean invited them into his stars off machine. Then of course, from then on, you can probably guess, things got really into a horrible mess. All the rest of the day on those wild streaming beaches, the fix-it-up chappie was fixing up Sneetches. Off again, on again, in again, out again, through the machine and back around again. Still paying money, still running through, changing their stars every minute or two, until neither the plane with the star bellies knew whether this one was that one or that one was one, and this one or which one was what, or what one was who. Dead. When every last cent of their money was spent, the fix-it-up chappie packed up, and he went. And he laughed as he drove in his car up the beach. "I'll never learn, no, you can't teach us Sneetch." But McBean was quite gone. I'm quite happy to say. Sneetches got quite a bit smarter that day. That day they decided that Sneetches are Sneetches, and no kind of Sneetch is the best on the beaches. That day, all the Sneetches forgot about stars and whether or not they had won upon stars. Okay, so that was the story of the Sneetches, and in case you're wondering, you still get a sermon. But keep the Sneetches in mind. Now, I'm quite sure that you have been sitting on pins and needles all week, waiting to hear about those poor, unfortunate folks in Israel whose homes and livelihoods were ruined when the Babylonians came charging into their territory. Now, some of you might have had the presence of mind to open your Bibles and read through the remaining chapters of Lamentations, and if you did, you should be congratulated. I'm thankful for your curiosity and wisdom. But just in case you didn't quite get around to finding out on your own what happened to the destitute people of Israel, or you weren't here last week, I'm going to bring you all up to speed. And you knew I would do that anyway. So, here's the deal. The entire city of Jerusalem had been destroyed. Thousands of people died, and many of those still alive were carted off into exile in Babylon. And that's what last week's lesson from Lamentations was all about. But I know you've been wondering what happened to all those exiles. Well, I'm going to tell you. Here's where we are in the story. After the Babylonians carted the Israelites off out of their homeland, they found themselves living in foreign territory, without familiar surroundings, without their temple, which was the center of their lives. They were strangers trying to come to grip with awful circumstances. Now, not all of Judah had been exiled. The unskilled, the lower classes, people considered to be unimportant or less influential were permitted to remain in the homeland. But the others, the leaders, the artisans, the people with skills, were led away to Babylon. So in the midst of all these tragic circumstances, along comes the prophet Jeremiah, who has remained in Judah. Everybody had high hopes that the exile wouldn't last long, and there were prophets who fed that hope, false prophets, according to Jeremiah. These so-called prophets were leading people on, filling them with promises that God would soon return them to their homeland. And that's what made Jeremiah write to the exiles, telling them that they needed to find some way to adjust to their current circumstances. Returning home wasn't going to happen in the near future, Jeremiah said. That being the case, they really did need to settle in, establish roots, and build relationships with the Babylonians. And in spite of the harshness of their new lives, Jeremiah called upon the exiles to find the strength to adapt. And not only that, Jeremiah's words delivered a certain and clear message to them. They were to become an integral part of the culture and society. They were to marry, build homes, and plant crops. In other words, those in exile needed to get on with their lives as best they could, even though they were outsiders living in foreign territory. you, to sell out, to give in to their situation, to blend in, and even to lose their identity as people of God. But that's not the intention Jeremiah had. Jeremiah is writing to encourage people to live their lives, to look forward to the future, not to dwell on what couldn't be, not to become so discouraged and distraught that they wouldn't be able to cope. Jeremiah's letter was meant to encourage and to comfort so that throughout the time of exile, people could prosper. Even though they were exiled and foreigners, Jeremiah told them that God would be with them along the way and that God would help them find the courage within themselves to do more than just survive. Jeremiah told the people in exile that their lives reflected a new normal. There was no going back to their home and their former lives. Indeed, life would never be the same. Nevertheless, Jeremiah wrote, "It's not bad. Look forward. Get on with your lives. Build a new future for yourselves." Jeremiah encouraged those in exile. The past is gone. Something new is being born, and God is moving with you forward. You know, we've all been experiencing what it means to keep a safe distance these days. Over the past couple of years or so, we've been dealing with the dreaded pandemic. We've all been affected by it. We've been wearing masks, washing our hands with sanitizer, and staying away from other people as much as possible. None of us wants to be a victim or carrier of the COVID virus. So on some level, we might have a new appreciation for keeping our distance from other people. Even here in our sanctuaries, you look around, we spread out with plenty of space between one another. So now, I want you to think about what it means to be declared unclean, unacceptable, thrown out by the rest of society. Think about the sneetches. This is what I'm going to read you from Leviticus. This is from Leviticus. God spoke to Moses and Aaron, "When someone has a swelling or a blister or a shining spot on the skin that might signal a serious skin disease on the body, bring him to Aaron, the priest, or to one of his priest's sons. The priest will examine the sore on the skin. If the hair in the sore has turned white and the sore appears more than skin deep, it is a serious skin disease and infectious. After the priest has examined it, he will pronounce the person unclean. If the shiny spot on the skin is white but appears to be only on the surface and the hair has not turned white, the priest will quarantine the person for 7 days. Quarantine sounds familiar, doesn't it? On the 7th day, the priest will examine it again. If in his judgment the sore is the same and has not spread, the priest will keep him in quarantine for another 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest will examine him a second time. If the sore has faded and hasn't spread, the priest will declare him clean. It is a harmless rash. The person can go home and wash his clothes. He's clean. But if the sore spreads after he has shown himself to the priest and then declared clean, he must come back again to the priest, who will conduct another examination. If the sore has spread, the priest will announce him unclean. It is a serious skin disease and infectious. And it just goes on and on and on. If you really are interested, check out the 13th chapter of Leviticus. So I'm going to skip a whole lot. But then I'm going to get to this point. Any person with a serious skin disease must wear torn clothes, leave his hair loose and unbrushed, cover his upper lip, and cry out, "Unclean, unclean," as long as anyone has the sore, that one continues to be ritually habitually unclean. That person must live alone. He or she must live outside the camp. Our gospel lesson today is a story about 10 men who had leprosy, a disease that caused awful open sores to appear on an afflicted person's body. It was ugly and debilitating, even fatal. Leprosy, or any number of other skin conditions, were considered highly contagious, and so people with skin rashes were often required to leave their homes and families and separate themselves from the community. They lived in isolation and shame. The priests declared them to be unclean and therefore forbidden to come into contact with anyone. After reading and sharing with you what was supposed to happen with all these unclean sorts, I thank God I don't have to diagnose your skin rashes. In the first place, I don't think I could keep any of the rules straight. And I think we'd all end up being sent outside and camping outside of town. So we can thank goodness, I don't have to put up with it. When I was growing up, I had a wonderful friend named Sally Fitzgibbons. She had long red hair and loads of freckles. We did everything together. We slept over at each other's houses. We often ate dinner in each other's homes. Our mothers just got used to having us around most of the time when we were in school. Many of my summer weekends were spent with Sally's family at their cottage on Lake Erie. But Sally had a problem. Whenever our teachers put us in a circle or lined us up or told us to hold the hand of the person next to us, no one would stand next to Sally. No one wanted to have to hold her hand. You see, Sally had warts on her fingers, icky, bumpy warts that made everyone in our class want to stay away from her. In those moments, Sally was an outcast. She was alone and left out. The 10 outcasts in our gospel story faced fear and rejection. Out of necessity, they had formed their own little community. They most likely supported and looked out for each other. They had to in order to survive. All they had was one another. They'd been rejected by their families and friends. They couldn't worship or shop or work. They obeyed the laws. They kept to themselves and kept their distance from the clean town folks. They were the people no one wanted to see. Whenever they came to town, they were required to shout the word unclean, so the clean people would avoid any contact with these men. I have to admit that in spite of my friendship with Sally, I felt awkward holding her hand. I often found myself hesitating to reach out for her hand, even though I knew I should. One amazing day, the 10 men with leprosy ventured into town, probably begging for food. Lo and behold, they saw the teacher that they had heard about, and keeping a safe distance, they asked Jesus to help them. And that's exactly what Jesus did. Without touching them, Jesus told them to go show themselves to the priest. Not being in any position to argue or question, they did as they were told, yet knowing that there was only one reason to see the priest. They obediently headed off to hear the priest's verdict, either clean or unclean, either insider or outsider. Wonder of wonders, as they walked off, their sores and scabs were healed. Feeling returned to their hands, arms, and legs.